My husband's mistress sent me a video of their affair right before our anniversary, and now he's threatening to take full custody of our kids if I don't drop my divorce claims. My name is Amanda, 32F, and up until 2 weeks ago, I thought my life was relatively stable. I've been married to Mark, 35M, for 8 years, and we have 2 beautiful children together, Maya, 5, and Jake, 3. Our marriage had its ups and downs, but I never once doubted Mark's commitment to our family. Or so I thought. It all came crashing down the day before our anniversary. I was out grocery shopping, getting ingredients for a special dinner I'd planned. As I was checking out, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I opened it, expecting a spam text, but instead, I found a video. My heart stopped when I saw the thumbnail. It was unmistakably my husband, and he wasn't alone. I tried to tell myself that it had to be a mistake, but as I played the video, the truth became undeniable. Mark was in bed with a woman I didn't recognize, and they were far more than just friendly. I felt a wave of nausea rise up, and I barely made it to the bathroom before I was sick. I had never felt so humiliated, betrayed, or heartbroken. When I got home, I locked myself in the bathroom, rewatching the video, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. How could he do this to me? To us? And who was this woman? Before I could process the shock, another message came through. The woman in the video introduced herself as Jessica, my husband's mistress. She said she wanted me to know the truth before I wasted another year with him. She mentioned things only someone close to him could know, inside jokes, intimate details of our life, even specifics about our children. She knew it all. Jessica's final blow was a threat. She had more videos, more proof of their love, and if I didn't confront Mark, she'd send them to everyone we knew. My stomach turned at the thought of our friends, my family, his coworkers, seeing this betrayal. I realized, with a sinking feeling, that Jessica wasn't just trying to destroy my marriage. She was relishing in it. As I sat there, numb with shock, I heard the front door open. Mark was home. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and walked into the living room, video in hand. He looked up, surprised, and then, as he saw my expression, guilt washed over his face. For a split second, I saw panic in his eyes, but then he composed himself, crossing his arms defensively. "What's going on, Amanda?" he asked, trying to sound nonchalant. I showed him the video. His face drained of color, and for a moment, he was speechless. Then, like a switch, his demeanor changed. He became cold, almost calculating. "So, now you know," he said, his voice flat. "It's been over for a long time, Amanda. I just didn't think you'd find out this way." I felt a surge of anger, the kind I'd never experienced before. "How long, Mark?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "How long have you been doing this behind my back?" "Does it matter?" he shot back, his tone harsh. "You've known things weren't perfect. Maybe if you paid more attention to me, we wouldn't be here." I was stunned, the audacity of his words hitting me like a slap in the face. He was trying to make this my fault. I was furious, but I held back, unwilling to give him the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. I told him I wanted a divorce. I didn't even care about the details, I just wanted him out of my life. But instead of remorse, he laughed. A cold, bitter sound that chilled me to the core. "Oh, you think you're going to walk away from this that easily?" he sneered. "Good luck with that. If you try to divorce me, I'll fight for full custody of Maya and Jake. I'll make sure you don't get a cent of our savings. You'll end up with nothing." The cruelty in his eyes was like nothing I'd ever seen before. It was as if the man I'd married had transformed into a stranger, someone who was willing to do anything to hurt me. He knew exactly how to twist the knife, and he didn't hesitate. I was shaken, but I knew I couldn't let him intimidate me. I stood my ground, telling him that I would fight for our children, that I wouldn't let him bully me into silence. He shrugged, as if he'd expected as much, and left the house without another word. That night, as I lay in bed alone, I realized just how much my life had changed in a single day. The man I'd loved, the father of my children, had not only betrayed me but was now threatening to take everything I held dear. I knew I had to protect my kids, no matter what it took. And if Mark wanted a fight, I was prepared to give him one. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of my phone buzzing incessantly. It was filled with notifications, messages from family, concerned texts from friends, and missed calls from my mom. I was disoriented until I remembered everything that had happened the day before. Then, it hit me like a ton of bricks. My marriage, my family, my entire life was unraveling before my eyes, and now everyone else was starting to take notice too. I ignored the messages and calls, not ready to face the questions I knew were coming. Instead, I called my lawyer Maggie. She was a friend of a friend, and though we hadn't spoken much before, I'd heard she was relentless in divorce cases. I explained everything to her, laying out the details of Mark's affair, his threats, and Jessica's interference. Maggie listened, and I could tell she was taking notes. "Do you have proof of his affair?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. "Yes," I replied. "Jessica, his mistress, sent me a video. I have the messages she sent too." "Good. We'll need everything. Any texts, emails, anything that could show his infidelity or his threats about the children. The more evidence we have, the stronger your case will be." She explained that, given Mark's threats to go for full custody, I'd need to prepare for a brutal fight. She told me that he might try to paint me as an unfit mother, to discredit me any way he could. The thought made me feel sick. I'd been a devoted mother, always putting my and Jake's needs before my own. The idea of having to defend myself against such accusations was horrifying, but I knew I had no choice. After hanging up with Maggie, I braced myself and checked the missed calls and messages. My mother had left a dozen voicemails, each one sounding more panicked than the last. I decided to call her back and tell her the truth. She answered on the first ring, her voice filled with worry. "Amanda, what's going on? I saw Mark's posts, and I've been calling you all morning. Are you okay?" I hadn't realized that Mark had already started spreading his own version of events on social media. My anger flared. He was trying to get ahead of this, to manipulate the narrative before I even had a chance to react. I took a deep breath and told my mom everything, about the affair, the threats, and the video Jessica had sent me. She was silent for a long time, and I could hear the hurt and disbelief in her voice. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I can't believe he would do this to you." She assured me that I had her full support and that she would help however she could. I felt a small sense of relief knowing I had someone on my side, but I knew that this was just the beginning, and the real battle was still ahead. Later that day, Mark showed up at the house. He let himself in as if nothing had changed and started packing a bag. I was standing in the hallway, watching him when he turned to face me. "What are you staring at?" he snapped, his voice laced with contempt. "Why are you here, Mark?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "You've already done enough. Just leave." He laughed, a cold, mocking sound that sent a chill down my spine. "Oh, I'm not going anywhere, Amanda. This is still my house, and I'll come and go as I please." He slung his bag over his shoulder and walked past me, but as he reached the door, he paused. "You might want to think twice about going through with this divorce," he said, a sinister smile playing on his lips. "Because if you do, I'll make sure you regret it. I'll take everything from you, our home, our kids, everything. You'll be left with nothing." I clenched my fists, refusing to let him see how much his words affected me. "You're not scaring me, Mark. I've already contacted a lawyer, and I'm prepared to fight for what's mine." He raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "A lawyer? How quaint. You really think you can beat me? I have more money, more resources, and a hell of a lot more experience in these things than you do." I watched as he walked out the door, his words echoing in my mind. He was right about one thing. He did have the advantage. But I wasn't going to back down. I would fight for my kids, for my home, for everything he tried to take from me. Over the next few days, I worked with Maggie to gather evidence. We compiled the video Jessica had sent, as well as screenshots of her messages, which were filled with details about her relationship with Mark. I also collected texts from Mark himself, including his threats about the kids. Maggie assured me that we had a solid case, but she warned me that it wouldn't be easy. Mark had already hired a high-powered attorney, and he was prepared to drag me through the mud. One evening, as I was putting Maya and Jake to bed, I received a call from a blocked number. Hesitantly, I answered, and to my horror, it was Jessica. "I just thought you should know," she said, her voice smug. "Mark told me everything. He told me you're trying to take his money, trying to ruin his life. He won't let you get away with it. and neither will I. I tried to keep my composure, refusing to let her get under my skin. I don't know what you think you're accomplishing by calling me Jessica, but you're not going to intimidate me. Oh, I'm not trying to intimidate you, she replied, her tone dripping with malice. I just wanted to let you know that Mark and I are in this together. We're a team, and we're not afraid of a little fight. Good luck, Amanda. You're going to need it. She hung up, leaving me shaking with anger and frustration. It was clear that Mark had recruited her to help him in his campaign against me. They were both determined to destroy me, to take away everything I held dear. But I wasn't about to let them win. After tucking the kids in, I called Maggie and told her about Jessica's threats. She advised me to document everything and to be cautious. We were preparing for a legal battle, but now it felt like something far darker. Mark and Jessica were ruthless, and I had no idea how far they were willing to go to get what they wanted. As the weeks went on, the tension between Mark and me escalated. He continued to pop in and out of the house, acting as though nothing had changed, as if he still had every right to be there. I had to keep my distance, not wanting the kids to witness any more hostility between us, but it was impossible to avoid the constant taunting. He'd bring Jessica over sometimes, parading her around as if daring me to react. Each time, I swallowed my pride and reminded myself to stay focused on the end goal, getting him out of my life for good. One afternoon, Maggie called with a surprising development. Amanda, I've just received some information you need to hear right away. Are you sitting down? Oh, yeah, I replied, bracing myself for whatever was coming. We found out that Mark's been hiding assets. He has another bank account, offshore, that he's been funneling money into. It looks like he's been preparing for this divorce longer than you realized. I felt a mix of anger and betrayal swell up inside me. So he's been planning this all along? That would explain why he's so confident. Maggie continued, it seems he's been preparing for any possible outcome. And Amanda, he's not just moving money. He's also been gathering information on you. Hiring private investigators, combing through your financial records, anything he can use to turn this case in his favor. Information on me? I asked, incredulous. What does he think he'll find? Maggie hesitated. It's possible he's looking for anything he can twist or manipulate to make you look bad. We need to be prepared for him to bring up your past, any past relationships, or anything that could be taken out of context. I could feel the stress mounting. Mark wasn't just trying to win custody of the kids. He was trying to destroy me in every way possible. He wanted to make sure that, no matter the outcome, I was left with nothing. I thanked Maggie and hung up, trying to process this new betrayal. How I ended up here in a war with the man I once loved. Later that day, as I was picking up Jake from soccer practice, I ran into Mark's mother, Evelyn. She was waiting in the parking lot, her face a mixture of sadness and shame. She approached me, looking more worn down than I'd ever seen her. Amanda, can we talk? She asked, her voice shaky. Sure, I replied, wary but willing to hear her out. I had no idea things had gotten so out of hand between you and Mark, she began. He hasn't told me everything, but I've heard enough to know he's behaving terribly. I raised him better than this. Her admission surprised me. I had never expected Evelyn to take my side, even partially. She'd always been fiercely protective of Mark, often dismissing his flaws. But today she looked like a woman who had seen her son transform into someone she no longer recognized. I wish he was the man I thought he was, Evelyn, I replied, unable to hide the bitterness in my voice. But he's made his choices. He's chosen Jessica, chosen to betray our family. And now he's doing everything he can to hurt me, including trying to take my kids away. She nodded, her expression one of regret. Amanda, I'll be honest. I came here to ask you if you'd be willing to reach a settlement, to find a way to end this without more pain. But after hearing what he's done, I can see that he's crossed too many lines. I took a deep breath, considering her words. He's made this a fight, Evelyn. I didn't want it to be this way, but he's left me no choice. I have to protect myself and my children. Evelyn reached out, squeezing my hand. I understand. Just know that I'll help however I can. I want what's best for my grandchildren, and if that means supporting you, then so be it. Her support meant more than I expected. It felt like I had an ally, someone who understood the magnitude of what Mark had done, As I drove Jake home, I found a new resolve building within me. Mark might have Jessica and his lawyer on his side, but I wasn't alone. I had people who believed in me, people who knew the truth, and I was determined to see this through to the end. A few days later, I received a call from Jessica, of all people. Her number popped up on my phone, and despite my better judgment, I answered. I needed to know what new game she was trying to play. "Hello, Amanda," she purred, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. "I just wanted to congratulate you. Mark and I are doing great, and we're moving into the house together soon." "Why are you telling me this?" I replied, struggling to keep my composure. "Oh, just thought you'd want to know. After all, it'll be your kids who'll be living with us part-time soon enough. Mark's already talking about custody arrangements." The audacity of this woman was astounding. "You really think that's going to happen?" I shot back. "You and Mark can play your games, but you're not going to win." "Oh, I'm not playing games, Amanda," she sneered. "I'm just preparing you for what's coming. I hope you're ready, because once we're done, you won't have anything left." She hung up, leaving me with a boiling fury. It was clear that Jessica and Mark were determined to make this as painful as possible, to strip away everything I held dear. But instead of breaking me, their threats only fueled my resolve. They wanted to fight, and I was going to give them one. That evening, as I sat down with Maggie to go over our case, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I wasn't going to let them ruin me. I was going to protect my children, my home, and everything I had worked for. Mark had made the mistake of underestimating me, and he was about to find out just how wrong he was. As the custody battle dragged on, the stress was overwhelming. Mark and Jessica seemed determined to grind me into the ground, leveraging everything they could to make me look unstable, irresponsible, and unfit as a parent. I was battling not just for my kids but for my sanity, as each day brought a new, twisted tactic from their side. Then, one afternoon, Maggie called with news that shook me to my core. "Amanda, I'd just received a call from a private investigator. They'd found something on Jessica, something that could turn this whole case around." My heart raced. What did they find? Maggie hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "It turns out Jessica has a criminal record. There's a history of drug use and a few charges for petty theft. But that's not all. Apparently, she was caught embezzling funds from a previous employer, a case that was quietly settled out of court. Mark might not even know about it, but it's certainly something that would interest a judge." I felt a spark of hope. This could change everything. If the court knew about her past, they might rethink Mark's influence in our children's lives. Maggie continued, "Yes, but we have to be careful with how we present this. We don't want to look like we're on a witch hunt, but this does show the kind of company he's keeping and how it impacts the kids." Armed with this new information, I felt more confident walking into our next court date. Mark and Jessica sat across from me, smirking, as if they already knew they'd won. But as Maggie laid out Jessica's past, their expressions changed. Mark's face twisted in anger and shock as he looked at Jessica, who was now visibly panicking, her smug demeanor completely gone. This woman, who has a history of theft and deceit, is attempting to help take my client's children away. Maggie's voice echoed in the courtroom, her words cutting like a blade. "It is clear that Mr. Adams has not been honest about the people he is associating with and the environment he is subjecting his children to." Mark tried to jump in, sputtering excuses, but the judge silenced him. "I am disappointed to hear this, Mr. Adams. It seems there is more to this story than you have presented. Your choice to involve someone with such a past in your children's lives raises serious concerns." The courtroom buzzed with tension. Mark looked as if he'd been slapped, while Jessica glared at me, her face twisted in a mix of rage and humiliation. For once, I felt like I was in control, like I was the one steering the ship. After the hearing, I returned home, exhausted but invigorated. For the first time, I felt like I had a fighting chance. I sat down with the kids, keeping things as light as I could, but they could tell something was different. "Mom, are we going to have to live with Dad and Jessica?" Jake asked, his voice trembling slightly. He was old enough to understand the gravity of what was happening, and I could see the worry in his eyes. I took his hand and smiled, squeezing it reassuringly. "No, honey. I'm doing everything I can to make sure you stay here with me. We're going to be okay." Over the next few days, the fallout from court continued. Mark and Jessica were suddenly less vocal, and it seemed the tables had finally turned. But then, as if on cue, Jessica struck back. One evening, just as I was tucking the kids into bed, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jessica, laced with venom. "You think you've won, Amanda? Think again. Mark's not the only one who knows about your little fling with that guy from college. Drop the lawsuit, or I'll make sure everyone hears about it." I froze, my blood turning to ice. How did she know about that? It was years ago, a mistake I had made before Mark and I were even serious. I hadn't thought about it in ages, but somehow she dug it up. She was threatening to weaponize my past against me. The next morning, I called Maggie, my hands shaking. "She's blackmailing me. Jessica says she'll go public with an old fling of mine if I don't drop the lawsuit. I can't believe this. How did she find out?" Maggie sighed. "It doesn't surprise me that they'd stoop this low. But Amanda, you can't let them scare you. We're too far into this. If you back down now, they'll walk all over you. But if they tell the court, if this gets out, what will it do to me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's from your past, and it doesn't change the fact that you're a good mother. It won't help their case. And besides, they're already hanging by a thread with Jessica's record out in the open. The judge will see this for what it is. An act of desperation." Despite Maggie's assurances, I felt a pit of dread in my stomach. I knew Jessica wouldn't hesitate to go through with her threat, but something in me had shifted. I was tired of being afraid, tired of being at the mercy of these two. They had taken so much from me already. I couldn't let them take any more. Later that night, I decided to take control of the narrative. I gathered my kids around and, without going into too much detail, told them the truth about the situation. I explained that sometimes people do things that aren't right, and that Mark and Jessica were trying to hurt me because they knew they were losing. I told them that I loved them and would always fight for them. With every word, I felt my strength returning. I wasn't going to let Jessica control me with secrets from my past. I was done hiding, done letting them think they held the upper hand. If they wanted a fight, I would give them one, and this time, I would be the one calling the shots. As I watched my children drift off to sleep, I made a silent promise. I would stand my ground, no matter what they threw at me. They had underestimated me for too long. Now it was my turn to make them regret it. The day of the final hearing arrived, and I could feel the tension buzzing in the air. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of threats, revelations, and sleepless nights, but I was ready. I walked into the courtroom, my head held high, and took my seat next to Maggie. Across the room, Mark and Jessica sat with their lawyer, both looking haggard and worn. I could see the cracks forming in their confidence, and it gave me the strength to keep pushing forward. As the proceedings began, the judge recapped the points from our previous hearings. Maggie presented our case, outlining the details of Mark's financial deceit, Jessica's criminal background, and the ways they had both tried to manipulate me and the kids throughout this ordeal. I could see the judge taking it all in, his expression growing more serious with each piece of evidence Maggie laid out. Then, it was Mark's turn. His lawyer tried to paint a picture of me as an unfit mother, claiming I was vengeful and unreasonable. They even brought up Jessica's threat, spinning it as though I were the one holding grudges and causing problems. But Maggie was ready. She calmly pointed out the absurdity of their accusations, systematically dismantling every lie and twisting of the truth. Finally, the judge looked over at me and asked if I had anything to add. I took a deep breath, standing up and meeting his gaze. "Your Honor, this entire situation has been an absolute nightmare. I married Mark because I loved him and believed in the family we were building. But he betrayed me and our children by prioritizing his selfish desires over our well-being. He not only stole from me, but he involved another woman, someone with a history of deceit, into our lives, and they tried everything they could to destroy my relationship with my kids." I paused, feeling the weight of everything I've been through. They've used threats, blackmail, and lies to try and force me to give up. But I refuse to let them take my children, my peace, or my dignity. I'm standing here today because I believe that my kids deserve a stable, loving home, a home where they are safe and not pawns in their father's twisted game. The judge nodded, and I could see a flicker of sympathy in his eyes. He turned back to Mark and Jessica, his face growing stern. "Mr. Adams, Ms. Lewis, it is clear that you have both engaged in behavior that is not only damaging but deeply concerning. The fact that you've attempted to manipulate and threaten Ms. Adams during this custody battle speaks volumes about your character. This court is responsible for determining the best interests of the children, and from what I've seen, your actions have been anything but in their best interest. Mark's face turned pale, and I could see Jessica shrinking back in her seat, her confidence crumbling under the judge's words. After a few more questions and a brief recess, the judge returned with his decision. He ruled that I would retain full custody of the children with supervised visitation rights for Mark. He cited Jessica's criminal history and the blatant attempts at manipulation as reasons for limiting their influence on the children. Additionally, he ruled in my favor financially, ordering Mark to repay the money he had taken from our joint account. The look on Mark's face as the judge delivered the verdict was one of pure defeat, and for the first time, I felt a sense of closure. As the judge banged the gavel, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. It was over. I'd won. Afterward, as I gathered my things, Mark approached me, his expression a mixture of anger and desperation. "Amanda, this isn't over," he spat, his voice low and venomous. "You may have won today, but I'll find a way to get back at you." I met his gaze, my face calm and unyielding. "No, Mark, it is over. You've done enough damage, and it's time for you to face the consequences of your actions. I'm done letting you control my life." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, his empty threats ringing hollow. I joined Maggie in the hallway, and she gave me a reassuring smile. "You did it, Amanda. You stood up to him, and you won." I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. It had been a long, painful journey, but I had emerged stronger. I had fought for my children, my dignity, and my future, and I had come out victorious. In the weeks that followed, I began to rebuild my life. I focused on creating a stable, loving environment for the kids, surrounding us with friends and family who genuinely cared. I finally felt free. Free from Mark's manipulations, free from the constant threat of his twisted games. The scars he had left would take time to heal, but I knew I had the strength to move forward. One evening, as I tucked the kids into bed, Jake looked up at me and smiled. "Mom, are we going to be okay?" I hugged him tightly, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. "Yes, Jake, we're going to be just fine." And as I walked out of their room, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The nightmare was over, and I finally had the freedom to start a new chapter. A chapter where I could live without fear, knowing I had fought for myself and my family, and won.